Here's something I recently learned that really stuck with me. Sleeping in a cooler environment actually helps your body release more melatonin, which not only improves sleep quality, but helps you fall asleep faster. Personally, I wish that I had known that when I was pregnant through the summer with my twins a couple years ago, but that's okay. That's okay. We know this now. And fast forward to this summer, I now have my Cozy Earth sheets and I simply cannot go back. They're made from ultra soft bamboo viscose and they're designed to be temperature regulating, which basically means that my body stays cool and comfortable even when it's a million degrees outside, which it's basically a million degrees outside these days. So no more tossing, turning, or waking up sweaty, just deep, uninterrupted sleep, which is simply all that I need at this point. And there's real science behind this, by the way. Cooler sleep environments don't just help you sleep better, they also support mood regulation and can reduce night sweats, which is really game changing for anyone who can relate. Whether you're pregnant or you are just a warm sleeper or you're going through hormonal changes or whatever it might be, maybe you don't have air conditioning, this is truly game changing. And it's really not just about comfort, it's also about well being. And if you're thinking, okay, Traci, that sounds great, but what if I don't love them? That's okay. Cozy Earth has you covered with a 100-night sleep trial so you can try them on the hottest nights of the year risk free. Plus, there's a 10-year warranty on all bedding. That's right, a decade of cool quality sleep. So go ahead, upgrade your summer, head to cozyearth.com and use code HUMANHR for 40% off their best selling temperature regulating sheets, loungewear, and more. Sleep cooler, lounge lighter, stay cozy. Welcome to the Bringing the Human Back to Human Resources podcast. I'm Traci Chernoff, and I've spent my entire professional career in HR. Each week, we'll explore the delicate balance between people and business with the aim to reconnect the two and create meaningful outcomes. Listen in as I share my own experiences, challenge the status quo, and chat with guests from various industries about our mission to bring the human back to human resources. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Bringing the Human Back to Human Resources podcast. Thank you so much for being here for another week. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you're catching this episode. And this episode, we're going to be talking about two really interesting things. One, employing contractors in a small business setting. So I do have a small business owner as a guest on this week's episode. And second, we'll be talking about how she builds culture in her organization, given that she has only contractors working for her. And it's a really unique example of how you can build culture, whether you have employees or whether you have contractors. She is the current owner of the multi-generational business Studio 13 and has over 30 years of expertise in corporate branding imagery. With a diverse team of photographers and associates, they cover an array of specialties and have a track record of delivering assets that support their clients' corporate marketing strategies. Their clients include global manufacturers, distributors, medical, pharmaceutical, and biotech organizations, and they also serve local, regional, and national accounts. The common thread through all of those firms is a need for excellence, accuracy, and brand transparency with their media. So, Leslie, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here, and it's such a cool background, such a cool experience that you have.
Thank you so much for having me, Traci. You know, when I sit back and listen to you say all that, I'm like, dang, I've done a lot in my lifetime.
That is truly what every single person says when they hear their bio read aloud in front of them. And every time I say, the listeners can attest to this, every time I say, it's so important to like have that reflection point and say, wow, yeah, I've done all of those things. That's pretty cool.
Yes,
Well,
it has been a wonderful career. Thanks for having me.
yeah, of course. And good for you. And being a multi-generational business itself, I know there's a story there. So maybe you tell us a little bit about Studio 13 and how you came to being the current owner.
Sure. So my grandparents were portrait wedding photographers down in Florida and in South Georgia. And so my mother was born in Florida. She's got three sisters. They all were photographers and involved in the business because, like you and I were just talking about, they ran the business out of their home. And so they all grew up in the business. And so my aunts took over my grandparents' business. And then when my parents got divorced, my mom and I moved to Indiana so that she could marry Joe McGuire, who is my stepfather. And it was his corporate photography business. And so they ran it for years and we ran it out of our home. And so I was around photography the entire time I was growing up, had a camera in my hand by the time I was 6. Went off to college. My parents said, get a degree in whatever you want. You need to be able to talk to the janitor and the senator. And so they wanted me to just get a well-rounded liberal arts education, which I did. And then I came into the business when I was 23 years old. And unfortunately, my stepfather had a stroke, and I had to take over the business at a very young age, very inexperienced. And then the business changed with the adaptation from film to digital. Then we had the Great Recession in the early 2000s. And then it came to be the business that it is today, where I have just myself and then 9 contract workers that we all work together to meet the needs of our clients. So it's been a long transition with a few bumps in the road, but we're in a really good place right now.
That's wonderful to hear, and of course, with the with unfortunately your stepfather's stroke, it was an unfortunate circumstance that led to you really probably finding yourself in and your career all the while. And something that is really poignant about your story is that there's this like thread of agility and adaptability, and that through all of these kind of ups and downs and bumps in the road, you and the folks that you employ as contractors, you've been able to really kind of rise to the tide and be able to adapt to the change of whatever it is, whether it's the economy or society, etc. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, there are two things that really work to that. Having generations of people that you can talk to, because there's nothing new under the sun. There's been recessions before. Now,
Right.
COVID and 9/11 and those kinds of things, those are, once in a lifetime experiences. But I could always talk to my mom. I still talk to my mom every day about the business. And then the other thing that I did was I built a network of people that are in different industries, so that when bad times happen, I have a banker who emailed me and she's like, hey, you see that they're doing whatever for COVID funding, and here's how you apply. And so just making sure that I've had so many consultants that I didn't have to pay because they were friends and family and part of not my network. I think that really made a huge difference in my career.
That's really interesting, and actually, it's so true that when there are people who are in your corner and want to see you succeed, and you have a really strong relationship with them, they are not necessarily thinking about their pockets. They're thinking about how they can support you in your efforts and your endeavors. So I mean, it just goes to show that when everyone says, relationships are really important, make sure you prioritize the people who matter to you. This is why. I mean,
Mhm.
it's the same as what you're saying about being able to speak with your mom still. It's like, that's a luxury really, to be able to have someone who has all of this knowledge and experience who is still so dedicated to seeing you succeed. It's not something necessarily that's found in the corporate world necessarily, because it's not a small business generally, or those are not small businesses that are, you know, that have so much skin in the game, so to speak.
Agreed. And that's why mentorship is so important. If you don't have somebody that's done your position or maybe done the next position that you want in your network,
Hmm.
you really need to go out and try to find somebody as a mentor that can fill that role.
Yeah, agreed. Agreed. Well, with that, I definitely want to hear more about how you run your business, because
Mhm.
as you mentioned, you have 1099 contractors. I assume that they're all in the US since they're 1099, based on the way that you've
Yes.
described them. So, when you look at your business, did you start out with contractors, or did you have employees who then transitioned to contractors, or that you
So
had to
I've
move through?
been
Yeah.
I've been all over the gamut. So when I took over my parents' business, they had 5 full-time employees. And so you can imagine that the overhead for a 20-something-year-old kid to try to keep up with, along with their facility and all the things that they had, it was overwhelming. And so, and you can also imagine as an employee taking orders from a 20-something-year-old kid that they had known me since I was a child. That did not go well. And I
Mm,
had no management training at all in my 20s. And so as people started to quit, I started not replacing them. And then I ended up just down to myself and one full-time employee. And I did that for a very long time. In this industry, as technology has changed from film to digital, the profitability of the business has changed. So we
sure.
used to have multiple facets of income, ways that the money came in the door. All of a sudden, digital comes in and we're a one shop pony. We don't have film, we don't have prints, we don't have process, and we don't have all those things that we can make money from. And so we just did it, the two of us, for many, many years. And then I lost my number one unexpectedly 4 years ago. She had a very brief battle with cancer because she
Mm,
refused to acknowledge that she had a lump in her breast, and it took
mm,
her in 26 days. And so my daughter, thank goodness, she came into the business and said, I'll give you 2 years to help you right the ship and come up with a plan of how to move forward. And so, being in the industry for so long, I have a huge network of people. I have long and loyal clients. And the business was getting to the point where I was turning down work. If I couldn't
wow.
do it, nobody was doing it. And my daughter's like, why? You've got all these assistants that you work with regularly. You have an educational background. I taught photography for 7 years. And she said, you can train them. And so she started working with me to make SOPs. We have a binder of all the clients that I do corporate headshots for, how I light them, how the camera works. Here's what it looks like. And she spent 2 years getting that grown for me. Then I started going out and actively seeking work that I don't do. So I don't shoot events, I don't do drone work, and I don't do video. And so I went out there and looked for people that would want to do that, shoot it, but then also clients. And so we've scaled the business to do that. So after my number one passed away, I realized things that I really didn't pay any attention to, which is that as a W 2 employee, if I don't have another W 2 employee, I can contribute to my retirement without giving it to anybody else. So when you're running a small business, how you plan for your retirement is really important. And so not only did I want to help myself, but I could also offer different services by having different photographers that do different things. So it just really kind of clicked with me that I could help myself for the future while kind of making my life easier by not having to maintain that much work by myself. I can serve my clients better because they now have other options. If I'm busy, I've got other people. And then also my funnel of people that work with me, my team, they're incredible people. They can have a better quality of life. I've got 3 stay-at-home moms that dictate how many hours they want to work a week, and they do it. That's my administrator, that's my social media person, and that's my salesperson. And so it really has given my team more flexibility, and it's really made an impact in my life so that I'm not working quite as hard as I was. Still working hard, but not quite as hard.
Right. Well, there are a few thoughts that I have here. The first is that I think it's really helpful to hear from a small business owner because a lot of my podcast episodes kind of center around corporate and bigger businesses, maybe medium sized businesses. And there's a humongous facet that's being missed when we don't talk about small businesses. And I had a friend of mine on last year who owns her own business. Maybe it was even 2 years ago at this point. She owns her own business, and she was talking about how she also employs contractors in an effort to really get her brand out there. It's an apparel company named or called Transcendent Active. And this was a big part of her kind of conversation, similar to yours, that this is how she's able to improve her brand, her reach, her marketing without sacrificing so much. Because of course,
Mm-hmm.
when you hire someone who is an employee or employed by a W-2 in the U.S., it's quite expensive compared to someone who is a contractor and is effectively kind of in the gig economy. Which brings
Mm-hmm.
me to my second point that you've kind of touched on, that there is this new wave of employment in the gig economy. We see it with Uber drivers, DoorDash, Amazon drivers are sometimes, in the gig economy. Like all of this kind of pick up and work when I want to or when I can is not just new wave, but it is probably the future, that people want to have maximum flexibility, or I should say a lot of people want to have maximum flexibility. To your example, these stay-at-home mothers who want to earn some type of income and want to work something, or do put an effort into something without sacrificing what they do at home. And this, I think, is what we'll continue to see. And so, as a small business owner, I think the listeners, I know that there are a lot of listeners who work for small businesses, or as they call it, mom and pop kind of businesses. And it's probably really helpful to hear what you've done to not only kind of stretch your runway, but also compete with the market around you. And I would imagine that there are listeners who are either in HR or who are kind of running, things in the background for a small business, who probably could take this kind of approach with certain elements to the businesses that they support. So it's really helpful to hear that. I'm curious from your perspective, how you see your business scaling, or if this is kind of where you want to maintain, or do you see kind of a future state for your business with these contractors?
Boy, I do see a future state. And you asked me a little bit ago, where were my employees located? Well, they are all local to Indiana. I have face to face meetings with my team.
Wow.
I work really hard to create a culture despite the fact that we're not all together every day, making sure to keep in touch with them about what's going on in their life. If there's an issue, I make sure, one of them lost their grandfather, they're going to get a card. One of them had a issue with somebody stalking them. Okay, what are you doing? Do you need my help? So for me, there's several things that go into making sure that my team likes what they're doing. They like working with me. They like how I treat them, and then compensating them well. So many of the gigs, when you're talking about, Uber Eats and Amazon, and even there's photography, that people are getting paid pennies. They can't support their family on that. And so what I'm doing is, photographers hate the business aspect. They hate networking. They hate doing the invoicing and the quoting and the billing, and they hate all that, and the editing. They hate all that. And so I'm taking all that off their plate, and I'm going and find customers that place value on what they do so that I can compensate them adequately for their work. And so there's just so much that goes into it besides just the ease of not having to support W-2 employees. That was overwhelming. And I can tell, if you're out there and you're running a small business, and I get you, I feel you, it was so much pressure to know that you had to keep up with payroll. So now if I don't have work and I don't have work to share, I don't have to pay
Hmm.
anybody. So
Hmm.
it's a very different way of doing business. I still think that the cultural aspect matters, but as a business owner, boy, the pressure on me is a lot less than it was. A lot
Yeah,
less.
that's a great example that, contractors work the hours that are afforded,
Hmm.
basically, and the
Hmm.
work that's there. I use contractors to run my business also. And it's one of the only ways that I can get episodes out every week while I work full time, and how I
Hmm.
can get social media posts up, because otherwise it's just kind of one of those things where you put in effort, but you just can't commit all of yourself to it. It's impossible. And contractors can be extremely helpful. So
Hmm.
it's great to hear that. And I think you talk about the cultural aspect. I think it's really worthwhile for us to talk about that,
Hmm.
and uh, how photography in itself as an industry, and also how you as a business owner drive culture. So why don't you walk us through that?
Sure. I don't think that there's a lot of photographers that are doing this. So I don't know anybody here in town that is actively pursuing work knowing that they're not going to shoot it, knowing that somebody else is. So I think it is an interesting way to do it. So, like I told you, especially with my administrators that are doing social media, we have an in person meeting every few months, every couple of months, so that I can connect with them. My assistants and my photographers, I see them all the time because I change up who's going to do what to who, so I see them and I can be invested in their life. So that investment, that kindness, I was told on the job last week, somebody just said, she goes, Leslie, I don't like working for other people anymore. And I'm like, okay, why? And she said, because nobody treats me like you do.
Hmm.
Nobody treats me with the respect that you do. Because all these photographers that are assisting me, they're bona fide photographers in their own right. They're not just there to carry the equipment. They're not.
Right.
And so making sure that they know that when I introduce them, I say, this is so and so, they're a qualified photographer in their own right. so that I give them the place that they deserve. So that's the first thing that I do. Every year we all get together and we have a holiday luncheon in the fall. We do it before any of the
Oh, that's
holidays
nice.
start. I get everybody together. We have a very great time at an expensive restaurant. It's all paid for by Leslie and I give them a state of the union. Here's how much we made. Here's what the difference was between this year and last year. Here's how much I paid for outside processing or, new equipment or whatever it was, so that they understand that they're a part of this team and I have nothing to hide from them. I am not afraid at all to tell you how much I'm making. And then I say, here is the bottom line as of October. It's normally around the 15th. And I said, here is a bonus. And I give each person on my team the same bonus. Nobody gets more, even if you produce more. Just because the administrator doesn't produce doesn't mean she's not just as important as a producer. Everybody gets a flat bonus. And I had somebody ask me why I do that. It's your money. You don't have to do that. I said, I have no business without my team. And I need them to know that. And so I feel like that's how I build the culture: kindness, respect, uh, sharing, openness, transparency, all those things, to make sure that when I text somebody, do you want to work this job? The answer is yes, because they can pick up
Right.
jobs from anybody.
Right.
But I want them to say yes to me.
Right, right. Well, it sounds like they have every incentive to do so because of the experience that they get. It's a really great example of how culture matters, whether or not someone is a W two employee or not. It's probably even more important to think about culture with contractors because there's no commitment. They can
Nope.
just say they could say tomorrow, "Hey, Leslie, I'm not going to be here anymore as of today." And that could put you and your business in a very difficult spot. Whereas with an employee, generally they could do the same thing, but there's a different type of commitment and there's money owed and there's, more resentment sometimes from situations like that. But when we really lean into the gig economy and we think about the flexibility that comes with hiring contractors appropriately, there is a freedom and a power in your ability to lead and manage your own business. And the team obviously is probably better off for it too because they're getting a great experience. I'm sure that there are small business owners out there who are doing the opposite and they don't see the power of their words and their influence and their actions and all of that. But realistically, contractors, even though it's just a distinction, they're still members of the team. It's just a matter of what qualifies them to be contractors versus employees. So they should have a culture. They should have a feeling of connection to the business and the goals and the work that they're doing. So it's really interesting and great to hear how you drive culture within your own organization so that they are picking you when you say, "Hey, can you work for me this weekend?"
Yeah,
That's
when they
awesome.
have to say no, they normally go, "Dang it,"
Yeah.
because they know that they're going to be compensated well and they're going to be treated well. And so I'm very, very fortunate. And just to that point of somebody leaving, I have only had one person leave in my 3 years. And that was because they're a full time teacher north of town and they weren't working with me a ton and they just didn't feel like they had the time. But I'm constantly looking for new assistants. I'm constantly on the hunt for new photographers, even though they don't leave. Thank goodness. The goal is that they're going to all be so busy that we need more people to assist me, because if I'm giving work to my assistants, then who's going to take care of me? So
Right.
it's a matter of keeping your eyes open and looking for people that are interested, that want to
Right.
be a part of the team.
Right. Good for you. I think this has been so enlightening because there is again so much adaptability in your story and so much agility in how you've really just figured out how to run your business the best way possible. And you're employing a lot more people today than you would be able to if you had W 2 employees who you're paying benefits for and all of that. And I'm sure that there might be listeners who are like, oh, well, people need benefits and they need these things. However, when people have steady work, they are more likely to be able to afford benefits. Like, you can fold, it's the same way to fold, one piece of paper. Either they're getting the benefits through their employer as a W-2 employee, or they're working more regularly, more consistently through the gig economy, and they can afford benefits on their own. And it's one of those things. I know sometimes people have kind of an emotional reaction to that, but at the end of the day, there are countries all over the world that prioritize or prefer contract employment. Like, for example, I'm not sure if you're aware, but in Argentina, people who, employees prefer to be contractors, whether it's because of tax advantages or, the flexibility. But there are countries, my point here is that there are countries all over the world that put an emphasis on contract work over, um, you know, uh, benefits eligible or full-time employment. So it's a very interesting concept.
Yeah, not just that, but this next generation, my children are 26 and 28, and they want more time at home.
Yeah,
And the it's not just a small business that's not giving benefits. I am wrapping my arms around the fact that this is the way people want to work.
it's
And
true.
if that's the way they want to work, then let's do it that way. It just also happens to benefit me. And small
Yeah,
businesses, just one more point on this, small businesses are more likely to pay contract workers what they're worth, where big companies are not. And I've got one of my photographers that I almost started crying because she's working for a large photographic company. I'm not going to name names. They are paying her $16 an hour to take pictures.
oh
And
my
I'm like,
gosh, wow.
that's terrible. And then they don't even compensate her for her mileage. They give her half the regular going rate for her mileage when she travels. And I'm sitting there going,
That's crazy.
we got to fix this. So
Yeah.
it just as your listeners are thinking about this contract work, a lot of times it's more lucrative.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. It really is true. Contractors do tend to earn more. It's really true. And for that contractor that you have, she should know there is an IRS requirement around mileage paid. So she could bring that to her employer and remind them that they don't actually dictate how much she gets to receive as reimbursement per mile. Just so everyone knows, you can look it up on the IRS website what the mileage reimbursement rate is, and it changes every year. So, anyway, that's my plug for compliance. But I agree. I think that there's a real advantage for everyone. It's a very symbiotic thing because people who want to be contractors, they want to be contractors for a very specific reason, either for some of the tax advantages or the flexibility or the income advantages. And then there are people who want to be employees because they don't want to have any potential in not having the income. Sometimes people are just generally people who want to know they're getting paid every other week or however often consistently. And that's okay. They're not meant to be contractors, but certainly people who prioritize flexibility and being home and being able to dictate what their week looks like, those are the people who are really going to thrive in the contract space. So, Leslie, thank you so much for shedding some light on how you manage your business and being probably our first small business owner to talk about their business this year, because like I said, my friend came on and I haven't talked about small businesses since. So this has been really helpful. And where can the listeners connect with you if they're interested in learning more, or maybe even interested in coming aboard the Studio 13 side of things?
Sure. You can find me, studio13online.com. That is our full portfolio. We also have several educational pages about both photography and marketing. So if you have any need of that, you can also find the studio on Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook. And then you can find me directly on LinkedIn, Lesle Lane. And my name is spelled uniquely. So make sure you see how it's spelled or you'll never find me.
Exactly. And with that, we'll link everything in the show notes. The listeners will be able to connect with you and interact with your website as well. So thank you so much for joining the podcast and again for sharing all of your insights, and best of luck as you continue to scale your business.
Thank you so much, Traci. It's been a pleasure.
Hey, just before you go, don't forget to subscribe to the show so that you are the first to hear when an episode drops each week. And maybe leave a 5-star review and a comment about how much you loved this episode. Plus, if you have someone in mind who would really enjoy this episode, make sure you share it with them. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you next week.